Now, the world of Subnautica is definitely vast and expansive, with tons of different biomes, tools, and creatures that are there for you to explore as you make your way through the game. But, as I'm sure you know, there is a really large array of features, tools, and biomes that simply never ended up making it into the game and were cut before the final release. Well, in today's video, those are exactly the things we will be looking at, and more specifically, I will be picking apart those that have some sort of an implication on the lore of the game. So, we'll be covering 10 different items, objects, biomes, or features, and looking at how having them in the game could have affected / added to the lore or completely changed our perception of a certain feature or event. Now, of course, as with all of the lore videos, I have to warn you that this video will contain spoilers from the world and story of Subnautica. That's right, it's another double spoiler warning, so please, if you haven't had the chance to experience it yourself and you don't want to have any of it spoiled, I strongly recommend clicking off this video and coming back to it later. Now, with that out of the way, prepare your machine to travel back in time, open up that early version of Subnautica, and let's go. Now, first of all, let's talk about 3 specific features for one particular biome that were never implemented. That biome being the lava zone, and those features being lava sinkholes, lava bridges, and falling lava spires. Now, lava sinkholes on their own are the easiest to talk about, as there is actually one in the game already, albeit being inactive, and that is the lava pit that you have to go through to emerge into the lava zone from the inactive part. In the original concept, these would simply bubble up as they get filled with more and more magma until they would explode and resume the cycle anew, so they would definitely be a dangerous place to be around. The lava bridges, on the other hand, would be weak connectors that would spread over large chasms and lava pits down below that would occasionally collapse if you either dealt too much damage for them or simply got close. Same thing can be said for the falling spires, which are technically in the game. However, in the original concept, they were also supposed to collapse and possibly vibrate with the eruptions. Now, why I think this is interesting to mention is because if all of these features were present, it would effectively show that the volcano is once again becoming more active, having this extra pressure that it needs to relieve via the lava sinkholes, and having features that have presumably been standing for a long time collapse as the vibrations increase and become more violent. This could effectively mean that the volcano that is effectively the entire playable area of Subnautica is coming back to life and could signal the end for all of the life that's on there right now, were it to explode in the near future. But let's move on from there and let's talk about the alien bases, and more specifically 2 new keys that you could have used to enter these, and that would be the red alien tablet and the white alien tablet. Now, obviously right now the current purpose of them isn't exactly known, though presumably the red tablet would have deactivated some force fields and the white tablet would be intended to unlock the alien thermal plant. However, the reason why I'm mentioning these and why I think it's interesting is because as more keys get added to the game and we see their individual purpose, if you look closely, each of them has a different symbol on it, so maybe by having these in the game and seeing exactly what they did, we could start to very slowly decipher what kind of communication these runes, for the lack of a better word, foretell, and perhaps that way learn even more about the precursors. But let's move on from there and let's talk a little bit about the weather, because the weather in Subnautica is, well, let's be honest, kind of boring, but originally there was meant to be a lot more interaction, specifically with the moons affecting how the weather behaves, which would, lore-wise and science-wise, make complete sense, as them being so close would presumably put quite the strong gravitational pull on the planet itself, which could drastically affect how the nature around you is behaving. In terms of weather, there were supposed to be several different conditions, including different wind effects, rain, and storms, which would not only affect how surface exploration goes for you, but it would also make underwater exploration more difficult. And with that in mind, let's talk about cold water and currents, because this would once again tell us a bit more about the world and how the planet itself behaves. By flying off of the planet, we can presume that the majority of it is covered in water, which would, especially with the strong pull of the two moons, probably give rise to some pretty strong ocean currents. They could maybe bring some of the colder water from outside of the playable area back in and made exploration that much more difficult. Another reason why adding currents could be interesting is because that might offer an explanation to, well, number one, how certain individuals from the original game made it to below zero, and also number two, how some of the larger leviathans that might presumably live out in the void migrate around the smaller playable areas. And moving on from that, let's talk about some creatures that were never implemented and some features of animals that are actually in the game that were never pushed. Starting us off with balloon plankton, which was a very simple concept, simply having a bit of plankton that will charge up when it's aimed at with light. And even though this doesn't in any major way affect the gameplay, I think it would still make for a really interesting addition, as it would give us some context onto the kinds of organisms that some of the largest leviathans feed on. A much more interesting creature though, however, I think would be the sandworm, which was an animal that was supposed to burrow in sand, as the name suggests, and attack the player if they got too close. Now what I think is particularly interesting about these is that from the outside, they look somewhat similar to the second skeleton that you can find in the Lost River, and the one that we've kind of been mostly struggling with placing it into the ancestry chain of the creatures of Subnautica. But if the sandworm were a thing, it would give us what can presume to be a very direct ancestor, which simply shrunk down a little bit, but presumably retained most of its behavior. And finally, just to end this video off, let's talk a little bit about Kara. And the interesting thing about it here is that whereas the effects have mostly remained the same, the color has changed quite drastically, most presumably to differentiate it from the Kara of natural selection too. However, I think this puts a very interesting spin on how the bacterium behaves, because if there are two different, well, colored variants of it, then I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that the bacterium is in fact capable of evolving and adapting to whatever environment it finds itself in, which would effectively be one of the reasons why finding a cure is so difficult, because there is no singular strand of the bacterium. It could also make the sacrifice of the Sea Emperor somewhat less impactful though, as perhaps its enzymes only cure this one particular branch of the bacterium and would in fact not immediately cure everyone else that's infected out in the galaxy. But of course, it is also possible that this newly found enzyme could be used to synthesize a better cure. But with that, I'm gonna end the video off, so I hope you guys enjoyed and learned at least something new about the interesting world of Subnautica. If you liked the video, maybe consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. All of those would be very much appreciated. And if there's anything interesting that I missed, or a different cut feature that you would like to mention and maybe explain, make sure to leave that down in the comments below as well. I would very much like to read both of those things. With that, I'm gonna wish you a beautiful rest of today, and I'll see you all in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.